Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for Sepia Collective's third Reading the City, Compton Off the Wall. My name is Rosalind McGarry. I'm Creative Director of Sepia. I'm joined by our co-producer, Janice Miller, writer and urban planner from Compton, who will also provide support throughout this roundtable. We are broadcasting from the original home and land of the Tongva people. We'd like to take a moment to honor them, as well as several specific artists and cultural workers whose work and legacy make our work possible. They are Judson Powell, John Otterbridge, and Eliot Pinckney. Please join us for a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. We are also broadcasting today from Color Compton, a nonprofit art space in Compton that utilizes history and the arts to empower youth. Reading the City series is part of Sepia Collective's Compton Arts Project, which organizes community through the arts and builds programming that highlights Compton's cultural impact while centering Compton and South LA artists of color. The series features conversations with artists of different disciplines with connections to Compton. The first conversation focused on literary arts, the second on visual arts, and today we will be discussing public art, specifically murals. For more information about Sepia Collective and the artists featured today, visit us on Instagram at Sepia Collective or our website, sepiacollective.com. Throughout tonight's event, please feel free to type in any questions to be read during the Q&A session, and we will be answering them towards the end of our conversation. Today, 4 dynamic panelists have joined us. In order of presentation, they are Isabel Rojas Williams, who will provide historical grounding for our conversation, Mel De Paz, artist and muralist from Compton, who will share some of her work, Anthony Pittman, artist and muralist from Compton, who will share some of his work, and Dr. Kinsey Cornejo, who will lead a conversation and put all of this in context. It is my pleasure to introduce each of them in more detail right before they share with us. We begin with Isabel Rojas Williams. Isabel Rojas Williams is an art historian and curator. She served as the Mural Conservancy of Los Angeles Executive Director from 2011 to 2016. A native of Chile and resident of Los Angeles since 1973, she is a longtime civic activist who served as Mayor Villaraigosa's liaison to the Latino, the Asian, and the African American Heritage Committees. She had a major role in helping write the mural ordinance signed by Mayor Garcetti in 2013, which lifted the 2002 mural moratorium in Los Angeles. Recognized by the Los Angeles City Council as one of the 15 Latinas in the arts who has made an impact in the cultural landscape of Los Angeles, she served as an art historian, academic advisor, speaker, and curator for 4 of the 2017 Getty Pacific Standard Time Los Angeles Latin American exhibitions. It is a pleasure to welcome her today. Welcome.
Thank you for the introduction. I would like to share the presentation. There it is, okay. Okay. Thank you so much for attending this important conversation, and thank you for inviting me today to speak a little bit about the history of murals, which I'm gonna have to condense in 15 minutes, something that I've been researching for over 30 years. So it's gonna be a little bit fast, and I hope that you do get a little grasp of how all this happened. What's a mural? A mural is a hand-painted, hand-tiled, or digitally printed image on the exterior wall of a building that does not contain any commercial message. And for definition purposes, a commercial message is any message that advertises a business, business conducted, service rendered, or goods produced or sold. So to make it easy, a mural speaks of the history of the community, and a sign sells a product. That's the big difference between the two. And this is established in the Mural Ordinance that it was passed and signed by Mayor Villaraigosa on September 2013. From the beginnings of time, man, I'm talking man and women, man had the need to communicate and to connect by writing on walls. So we have the Lascaux and Altamira cave paintings that go back to 32,000 years ago. And recently in 2017, there were paintings discovered in Indonesia that go back to 45,000 years ago. So in reality, it's not new that we are creating murals. Murals had existed from the beginning of time. The three great Mexican masters, Orozco, Rivera, and Siqueiros, were invited by the United States to create murals in here and to bring their passion and the fervor, the political fervor that was characteristic of their artworks during the 1910 Mexican Revolution, where all these young muralists were painting walls, bringing all the issues that were affecting them to the walls of Mexico. In Los Angeles, the one that inspired most of the many muralists was Siqueiros. He actually continues to influence and inspire the people, the muralists in Los Angeles. Oops, what did I do here? But we need to go back to the 1930s when it was at the time when the historically Black colleges were some of the few, not to say the only ones, that were inspiring artists to paint murals. Excuse me for a second. Is it possible to get the paintings, I mean, the photos on the side, because I'm not seeing my notes? No? Excuse me for a second. No? Okay. Well, I'll figure out if you could move the photos from the side. Is that possible? Maybe there. There. Okay, I found it. Excuse me about that. Okay. So as I was saying, so African-American murals had the origin in the 1930s when very well-known artists were painting murals in Black colleges. People such as Aaron Douglas, Woodruff, Charles White, and Samela Lewis painted murals at different universities. At the time, John Biggers, who was a student of Charles White, a professor, teacher that had inspired many of not only the African-American artists and muralists, but also everybody in the city, he encouraged his students to create art based on their own culture about freedom and about the issues affecting minorities, instead of basing their arts on traditional European subjects. This is exactly the same that Siqueiros was doing at the time. So while the Hampton Institute, Biggers immersed himself in the works of the three Mexican muralists, Rivera, Siqueiros, and Orozco. Biggers became the chairman of the art department at Texas State University. And while teaching there, Leo Tanguma, a Chicano student of Biggers, created the very well-known The Rebirth of Our Nationality mural in the 1960s. This was a huge mural, 260-foot mural, and which was quickly erased because the political content. In 1967, William Walker, along with 20 other artists, painted the Wall of Respect on Chicago's South Side to honor Black heroes. At the same time, Walker and other artists wrote the artist statement indicating that their murals would continue to promote the liberation and struggle of Black and third world peoples. Since the wall of respect, artists from different ethnic backgrounds united in creating walls with tanks. And this is very important because this mural keeps on being recreated every year in different states and neighborhoods. So the connection here has been clear that from the beginning, we had that connection, the three greats and the African-American artists. In Los Angeles, there are two important murals that are at the landmark at the Golden State Mutual Life Insurance. These murals were painted in 1949, and they are site-specific, and the painter, Hale Woodruff, was highly inspired by Diego Rivera, and as well as the next mural that I'll show you, the artist was also inspired by Rivera. So you can see the bold colors. These are representation of people who had an incredible role in the development of California and specifically of Los Angeles. Charles Austin, Exploration and Colonization, same year, same place, and he painted this mural in this site, in specific in this building that it was closed in 2011. These three artists, Woodruff, Austin, and Rivera, they studied in France. So when they met, the only common language they have among themselves was French. So they spoke to each other in French. In the 1960s, murals galvanized South Los Angeles. The murals spread throughout neighborhoods, and African-American artists painted on walls of markets, community centers, grocery stores, and public parks. They evolved the themes from the Great Depression's bucolic landscape to representation of urban icons, cultural heroes, conveying political messages clamoring for equality and social justice for minorities and third world peoples. The issues affecting everybody at the time were like the students' uprisings of the 60s in Europe, Latin America, and the United States, the riots in Chicago during the Democratic Convention, the Vietnam War, the Cold War, the possibility of destruction by nuclear bombs, the Holocaust, Nazism, fascism, and Stalinism. All these issues permeated the art of the 20th century, where themes of identity, racial, and political activists inspired the birth of African American and Chicano mural art. From 1940 to 1980, numerous murals were created by African Americans in Los Angeles. Some of them no longer exist because they were destroyed or simply painted over. Murals aim to represent Black pride, Black self-determination, and support Black people, the African diaspora. Powerful murals reflected the many viewpoints of artists and art collectives at work during these explosive times, and their momentum makes for an electrifying visual journey. And I'm gonna show you some of the collection of artwork that we put together with a group of people for the first Getty Pacific Standard Time that happened at the California African American Museum in 2011. So John Otterbridge, who was the first director at the Watchtowers Art Center, and well-known assemblage artist and a social activist who knew everybody in South LA and LA. His art is collected by many and shown in many prominent museums. And he died this last year. Here's another artwork, another assemblage by Otterbridge in Compton, created during 1969 and 70. And there is always an issue, the lack of representation of women. When we put this together, we look for women. Well, during 1945 to 1980, there weren't many, so this is one of the few ones that we found. In Shasha Conwell, here's Charles Freeman. Charles White, with Mary McLeod Bethune in the middle, this philanthropist, educator, and one of the most important African-American women in the history of the United States. Richard Wyatt, who has painted many murals. Alonzo Davis, a homage to John Otterbridge at the Watchtowers, which is in need of restoration. Roderick Sykes in the 110 Freeway, part of the 1984 Olympic Freeway murals. Alonzo Davis, the same. This mural disappeared because the freeways were expanded. Cecil Ferguson, one of the incredible person that was a curator at LACMA. He made possible for African Americans and Chicanos to have exhibitions at LACMA. Alice Patrick, who painted here Mary McLeod in the middle with other important women in the African American. To Protect and Serve, Noni Olabisi, who painted this mural in 1992, a mural that was very controversial with many issues, and she painted a beautiful history of the Black Panthers Party, and she restored it recently. Willie Middlebrook, Portrait of My People. Michael Massenburg, 2011, in the African American Fighter Museum. And this is when it honors the 100-year history of African American firefighters. Patrick Henry Johnson, I'm moving forward so you can see what's in South LA. Moses Ball, who is in progress, his mural is not finished yet. And then I put Redna because to me, this mural represents all of us together. Redna using his writing that goes back to different languages in different countries. And then the centerpiece by Almag that is photorealistic and representing a Chicano figure. And on the hat, it reads, "For only love can conquer hate." So, by this time, by the 20th century, graffiti flourished in Los Angeles and in the world, and traditional and graffiti artists, muralists share walls equally. But design companies sued the city, and in 2002, the city of LA declared a mural moratorium that lasted 10 years because the sign companies wanted the same rights to walls. This is the year when the mayor signed the mural ordinance. I'm going to move forward very quickly now to Eliot Pinckney, who was one of the most prolific artists in South LA, Compton, and all over the city in reality. And I would like to read this, how he celebrated the history and progressive period of Black and Brown communities, which is so important to me because he embraces what I talked at the beginning, about the influence between the African American muralists and the Latino Chicano muralists. This is very obviously inspired by Rivera, by a mural that is called New Democracy. So I can see the influence clearly in Eliot Pinckney. I probably will need a couple more minutes to show you very quickly his murals throughout South Los Angeles and Los Angeles. And you can see most of these murals, he's showing depictions of heroes or regular people from the communities, from different ethnicities, mostly African American and Latino Chicano people. Like in this one, for example, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Cesar Chavez. And all these murals convey important issues, cultural, and talking about how to improve our lives, education, culture, evolution of the spirit. And this one, which is the last one that I have of his, which was restored in 2013 by Patrick Henry Johnson. And so it was a beautiful project of him restoring the mural with the mentorship of Mr. Pinckney. And very quickly, since we passed the mural ordinance, muralists develop incredible artist skills, and they began connecting with the same issues that the muralists from Depaz face, which is like the repression or the oppression, because there was a mural moratorium in the city. As lately as 2011, museums and galleries embrace graffiti art, and graffiti art walk into the galleries and museum. So Moca has one of the highest exhibitions of graffiti in 2011. And today, in different communities like Boyle Heights, East Los Angeles, South LA, Santa Monica, Pacoima, murals are painted everywhere. Wherever you go, they are muralists painting, depicting the issues that are affecting us today. And this is, we are like an open air museum where the passersby encounter in every corner a mural that serves as a liaison among the different neighborhoods, and they create a narrative of point of reference over the years of who we are and our culture. What's the future of muralism in LA? To me, tag murals are like the broken window syndrome, where neglected properties are as bad as tag murals. One house or tag mural can bring down an entire block, then a whole street, and then finally a community. Like a set of dominoes, the broken window syndrome or tag murals happen when we stop caring. Working together, we could regain LA's title as the mural capital of the world by quickly cleaning tag murals, help protect mural history and our culture, protect LA's murals as a legacy for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. That was beautiful.
I wish
Absolutely.
I could do taking a
amazing.
little longer, but I'm sorry.
No. That was absolutely wonderful. Well, I'm going to introduce our next roundtable panelist, Mel De Paz. Mel is a first-generation Salvadoran American artist, born and raised in Compton, California. Her work is influenced by design, color, and her upbringing in Compton. She takes influence from the locals' culture and landmarks motivated to paint a positive picture of Compton. Her journey to do this started with t-shirts of the city's landmarks with the intent to promote city pride. She later painted the Patria Coffee Compton painting. She later painted the Patria Coffee Compton painting located in the city's locally owned Patria Coffee Shop. She then went on to paint multiple murals for schools and businesses in Compton, and worked with local artist Anthony Pittman to paint the largest mural in the city, which she and Anthony will discuss later. Welcome, Mel. She's going to share some of her work with us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mel. Well, I feel like you guys know who I am. So I'm going to show you pictures of things that I've done. Let me share my screen. Okay, while that takes some time to load. Let me see. Okay. I don't know if I can share my screen. It doesn't really allow me to do that. Or, okay.
It should be open for you, no?
Yeah, it's like desktop. Okay.
Working?
I can talk about it.
Do you want to?
Probably should have tried this. Okay.
That's okay. Happens all the time.
Yes.
Show
Don't
the
worry
mural.
about it.
We can show the mural that I started working on, or the mural that me and Anthony worked on, because that was actually my first mural project.
Okay,
Wow.
hold for that. Let me pull that up. Hold on.
No, you're not sure. It might be on the somewhere, like you have to drag it into the screen.
Yeah, that's
So,
what I'm
like,
doing now. Ah, okay. Okay, let's try that again. Got him. Okay.
Beautiful.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm Mel. I'm a first generation Salvadorian American, born and raised in Compton. The reason why I've even gotten involved with painting in Compton was because I started with this painting on the left. It was for my high school teacher. He was my math teacher, which is pretty funny. And in his math class, we did like a art project, and he noticed that I could draw. And once I graduated, I went to leave some paintings at the pizza studio here in Compton for sale, and he recognized my name. Then we got in touch. He commissioned me for this painting, and then it was through him that I started making t-shirts, because at this time I was driving to different cities to sketch like landmarks and local places. So then I started doing that here in Compton. Oh, let me go back. And I did like the local landmarks, put that on t-shirts. Then I got to work with Compton High School, Dominguez High School, and Compton College to design some t-shirts for them. And that led to like a whole thing where I then painted this painting for Patria Coffee. And this was really inspired by this older painting that I had done. With this one, I wanted like a map of the city in like a playful, vibrant way. So my work, what I really tried to do with it is like to play with color, to make it light and fun and playful. So with this one, it was more like a map of the city, and at the center is Patria Coffee, because Patria kind of is in the center of Compton. And the courthouse is right across the street. So I did this, and then that led to painting the mural with Anthony at NHS, which we'll show later. And that was actually my first mural. And I met Anthony through painting that mural. We had met before at an art show, but we really met during that mural. And that was my first time doing like a commercial work, because based off what we just learned about murals, I don't think I've painted any, because all of mine have logos or like the business name, or they're not really like political. They're very just vibrant and yeah, playful, how I make my work. Then after that, I painted this peace tree. I guess this would be based off what a mural, the definition of a mural is. This is the only mural I painted, which is a tree at a charter school here in Compton. It's called the peace tree. It was intended to be like a tree where like the students come and leave like messages of hope and peace on the leaves. So like they tape the leaves onto the tree. And then from that, I painted a playground at this school as well. And that led to more paintings and commissions of Compton. And then eventually I worked with Foot Locker. And Foot Locker reached out because they were looking for local Compton artists, and they already had a Compton artist that they were going to work with. But things happened, and they contacted me because they went through a city tour and saw my Patria painting. And after getting word around, I was commissioned to do these paintings and some artwork in the locker rooms. And then that led to me working with two artists, Anthony, no, what am I saying? Angel Wentz and Goop Master, to work on the storefront mural. So this concept was already done. And I went in and added the people, and that was super cool. This was like my first like commercial based project that I had done, and it was cool to start out here at home with that. And I intentionally have only really done public works in Compton because I felt like my skills, I wanted to use them here at home before I went anywhere else to paint anything else. And then from that, I painted the Buffalo Spot. In the Buffalo spot, he asked me for something that celebrated the stars that came out of the city with Vaquero at the side, the high schools, the vendors, there's a little umbrella in the back. And yeah, and the car community here in Compton. So that's pretty much me.
Beautiful artwork.
Thank you, Mel. That was absolutely amazing. Thank you. I'm sorry, I couldn't find my mute button. Everything condensed for a minute. That was absolutely beautiful. Thank you. I'd like to read a little bit about our next roundtable panelist, Anthony Pittman. He is a local artist from Compton, California, who specializes in traditional painting, mural art, and floral design. Influenced by Catholic art, Black culture, and abolition decolonization, he has created small to large scale murals in Compton, Watts, and other Los Angeles communities that reflect family, community, culture, and justice. His paintings have been shown in exhibitions in New York and Los Angeles. In addition to his public artwork, he has worked as an arts educator for youth at Markham Middle School and Color Compton, and was recently described in KCET Artbound as following in Eliot Pinckney's footsteps. Welcome, Anthony. And I'm gonna pull up the screen for you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, my name is Anthony. I was born and raised in a Mexican household, but I'm also Black. So my experience growing up has been, you know, navigating Compton as a Black Latino and sort of finding the spaces and where I fit. I first learned my experience, you know, being an artist kind of happened backwards. I feel because I started with like a really huge commission, and I had never really shown art before. I had just known what art was like through like taking classes in middle school and stuff like that. But I have a friend whose mom was working at the YWCA, and she was throwing a show in honor of women who have survived domestic abuse. And I was chosen to do a painting for the honorary guest, who was Jenny Rivera. And Jenny Rivera is like a huge Mexican recording star, and you know, she's really important to Mexican regional music. So that was like my first really big project. And I went to the art teacher at Compton High, Mr. Palmer, because I was super freaked out, super nervous about it. And he was really cool and helped me like get the painting done. And through that, I was able to form a really good relationship with him, and he sort of became my mentor. He taught me everything that I know about painting pretty much. And, you know, he was responsible for taking us to portfolio days at school, even if we had to like go in his car, like meet up there on the train, you know, because there was never any resources to get a bus. But I really owe a lot of my talent and, you know, just my experience as an artist to Mr. Palmer. He really inspired me to do what I do. Also, my art has really been tied to activism. I feel like art is my voice when it comes to just, you know, showing up for my community and being visible. And that's a huge part of what I do. Even like at Markham, I don't teach, you know, traditional art. I teach sort of social justice and community empowerment through art, through art projects. And that's always sort of been my focus in the art world. And I feel like that's the role that I play as an artist. The mural that you're seeing right now is the Watts mural. This is the very first mural that I ever did. It looks a little janky, but you know, looking back, this was a super dope experience that I got. I was working at a summer camp at Markham Middle School in the heart of Watts, and I was taking on a lot of art projects. And towards the end of the summer, I wanted to do something really big and impactful that would leave a mark from that summer. And jokingly, the art director or the camp director was like, well, you should just paint a mural. And I had never painted a mural and touched a wall before, and I considered it, and I had even talked to the admin there at school, and they were like, yeah, go for it. They were super with it, and I was just like just excited and honored that they would even give me a piece of the school to be able to paint. So I set up this sketch on the wall, and then as I had kids come to my art rotation, they would help color in parts of the mural, and then you can see in the two T's in the middle, they left their name. And I have the Watts Towers inside of the A, and the S is a map of where Markham is, and it kind of shows like how it's in the center of Watts. And then we have like a silhouette of the city. And every year at Markham, I tend to do a mural. I've done half of the murals that I've done 12 in total. Half of the murals that I've done have been at Markham Middle School. And I actually just finished a mural last week at Markham. They just continue to be super supportive, and you know, they're one of my biggest clients, but it's because, you know, I keep coming back and they keep having me back, and it's like any project or anything that they want me to do, you know, there's no limitations, and they're very open to the sketches that I come with. So I've been super, super appreciative of having a family in Watts, and for the amount of exposure that they've given me, because my success is really owed to the amount of work that I've done with Markham. So can we go to the next picture? So at Markham, I do a lot of activities, and this is one of the activities that I would do every single year. This project is based off of the artist, oh my God, I cannot think of his name right now. But it's inspired by an artist who works by creating photorealistic images by painting these tiny squares, and in every single square, he uses like bright colors and patterns, and then when you step away from the piece, it creates this photorealistic image. And this is a favorite project that I like to do, because I would choose a figure, and then I won't tell the kids like what it is or who it is that we're creating. And then once we put our pieces together, I'll give them a little lesson on who the person was. This project I actually did here at Color Compton. And I chose Eliot Pinckney. And then once we put the mural together, I gave you know, a little background on who Eliot Pinckney is and why I think he was super important to the arts movement here in Compton. But with the kids, I've done, you know, Michael Brown, Selena, Basquiat, Angela Davis, like a ton of like figures that are important to our communities. And that way, you know, they get to learn who it is while also having fun and using the time to be creative and use bright colors and stuff like that. Next one. This is a mural that I did last year. It's kind of inspired by Diego Rivera, because my family comes from Guanajuato, and Diego Rivera was from Guanajuato too. And I took a trip to Guanajuato to visit my family for the first time. And I actually stayed in the city of Guanajuato for a few days, and it was just absolutely beautiful. There was vibrant murals all over the place. And I chose to do something that was sort of like the Sacred Heart, because, you know, I come from a very Catholic background. So a lot of my work is influenced by Catholic art. Originally, this was supposed to be the center mural for two murals that was going to be on the side. And the commissioner that I was working for sort of threw the other pieces to the side, and said that they really wanted to go with this one first. So I kind of had to add something to it a little more. Originally the hands weren't going to be in it, but because I am like a portrait artist and I love including just any kind of you know, people, or like especially portraits, because that's what I'm really known for. But I added the hands in there, and it sort of it made the meaning even more powerful, I feel, and it really stands out. It's super bright. And this is in Hollywood on Vine and Willoughby. And I have two other murals on that same wall. Next one. So like I said before, my art is my activism. My art is how I use my voice to voice my opinions and to, you know, sort of contribute to the fight against decolonization. This is a flag that I painted actually during the Colin Kaepernick incident that was going on, where he was getting a lot of backlash for kneeling on the flag. So I painted this flag to show people what it is that Black people often feel when we're forced to say the Pledge of Allegiance, or when we're forced to, you know, show respect to the national anthem. When there's so much going on in the world, you know, and people are, if people feel some way about something, you know, they should be able to freely express it. So it's crazy, you know, I painted that back in like 2017, 2018. And this is a picture of me at the riot, or at the protest last year. And it's just crazy how it stayed relevant, you know, and it will pretty much always continue to be relevant as long as we have, you know, an unjust system and state-sanctioned murder and whatnot. But yeah, this is just one way that I use my art as my activism. Next one. This is a picture of the direction that I feel my art is going into now. This isn't a mural, it's just a painting that I've done, but just to show you kind of like what my style is, it's looking at Western art and just kind of poking fun at it, the way that Titus Kaphar does and Kehinde Wiley, you know, they sort of take these like Western images or Western poses, and then they include Black people as a way to say like, you know, well, this is really like our history, or like, you know, we're creating these powerful images for us to be able to, you know, be inspired by and to see the beauty in Black people, you know? And I've started including floral design in my work as well, as sort of like a memento mori, because flowers for me have always symbolized death. I've experienced a lot of death in my life, and I've seen a lot of death play out over the media, you know, seeing people who look just like me being killed. So I've started adding like floral design and work and doing florals as a memento mori, because, you know, flowers are not permanent. They're absolutely beautiful, they're stunning, but at some point they're going to decay or die. And flowers have always sort of been something that I incorporate in my like shows, or I'll do like an altar with like florals and stuff like that. But more so now, I've been more inspired to actually include them as part of like the installation when I showcase my paintings. I feel like there's some, you know, there's like, it's like a different layer to, you know, just typical traditional painting, you know, just sort of like adding something new to it. The next one. This is a mural that I completed last year. This is probably the best mural that I've ever done. And it's my favorite mural because there was absolutely no limitations on what the commissioner was asking from me. This was commissioned by Abigail Lopez. She is the founder of Color Compton. And she actually found me on Instagram. I didn't know who she was at the time, and I actually didn't even like respond to her first message the first time, because I feel like at that point, having gone through so many nonprofits, I was just so fatigued and drained with even having to like, you know, put so much effort and so much work into things. And then, you know, I don't know, at that point I was just really fatigued. But you know, she messaged me again, and we ended up meeting at Patria, and she was explaining to me what her vision was and what her experience had been in Compton, and she seemed super passionate and about what she was saying, and I felt her like 100%, and we really like hit it off from the time that we met. And you know, she asked me if I wanted to do a piece for the mural that would sort of be like the welcoming piece when you first walk into the space. And she just told me that she wanted something to represent Compton, but that wasn't typical of like the images that we usually see, you know, like celebrities or like the courthouse, you know, something that was refreshing and that really represents who we are demographically and just as a city, like our history and, you know, the where Compton is and what it's always really been, you know, which is just community, diversity. We have like the circles, which represent like different spheres and cycles of time. We have, you know, the Compton Drive-In and Manny's Bike Shop, Compton High School, you know, which is being demolished. So as a way to also archive and preserve a lot of the buildings and things that we possibly might not have in the future. You know, I have the swap meet up there, and that's a Walmart now. So, you know, that's another way. This mural was a way to also just archive a lot of the beauty that we have in Compton that is slowly disappearing. The next one. So this is actually another project that I did with my kids in Watts. This is a community building project. The project is sort of based off of like community empowerment and having a conversation about what gentrification is and how, you know, big stores can contribute to gentrification. And we had to talk about, you know, how the property values rise sometimes when these big stores come in. So what I wanted the kids to do was reflect on their community as it is. And, you know, we made a list of things that they see in their community that they love and things that they wish they could improve. We talked about the type of businesses that they're used to seeing. So then what we did is we broke off and I gave them these tiny boxes, and with the tiny boxes, they created their own businesses and their own community, like recreational centers, and put them all together to create this idealistic city of like what Watts can become and the potential that exists there in the city. And the kids, you know, at first I was getting a bunch of like Walmarts and Targets and like GameStops, and I was like, you guys can think, you know, outside of that, you know, if you really think about Walmart, if you think about Target, all of those stores encompass all of these tiny stores that you guys are like creating and thinking about and wishing that you had, you know. So we had folks creating, you know, like an LGBTQ resource center, people creating nail salons and hair shops and pet stores and libraries. I had a group of girls create like a rehab center because they're just aware of what's going on in their community and they want folks to get help. We have people recreate Jordan High School because that's the high school that they're going to, or like Markham, their elementary schools. Excuse me. But this was like a really powerful project that I did with the kids, and you know, every little building had its mural on there, you know. So the kids are thinking about public art. They're thinking about like all of these establishments that exist in their community and ways that they can make their community better. And this is just the way that I, you know, sort of plant that seed in their head. They're young, middle school kids, you know, but just to get them to start thinking about it, and also to give them that platform to talk about what's going on in their communities. You know, they're young, they're 12 and 13 and 14, and do they ever even get the space to talk about that in school, you know, with everything that's going on. I've worked at Grape Street Elementary and Florence Griffith Joyner and at Markham. So I've been through the school system and, you know, dealing with LAUSD and the charter schools that are coming into Watts. So I really liked making my projects like a forum for the kids to be able to express all of the things that they're seeing in their communities that they normally don't get the opportunity to talk about. But yeah, this was like one of my favorite projects as well, this community building project. And I think that's it, right? Yeah. Thank you guys.
That was beautiful.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you, Mel and Anthony. Next, we have Dr. Kinsey Cornejo. She is an associate professor of contemporary Latin American art history at the University of New Mexico. Her teaching, research, and publications focus on contemporary art of Central America and its diaspora, art and activism in Latin America, and decolonizing methodologies in art. She holds a PhD from Duke University, an MA from UT Austin, and BA from UCLA. Her work has been supported by the Fulbright and Ford Foundations, the Creative Capital Andy Warhol Foundation Arts Writers Program, and the National Endowment for the Humanities. She is the daughter of Salvadoran immigrant parents and was raised in Compton, California, where she graduated from Compton High, class of 1998. Welcome.
Had to represent. Well, first of all, I just want to say that this is all giving me life. I'm loving this conversation, and I want to thank Sepia Collective and Janice for inviting me. I'm honored to be sharing this virtual space here with Isabel and Anthony and Mel. Thank you all for your presentations. Unfortunately, I don't have cool art to show, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about my experience. And I do want to contribute to the conversation with some thoughts about the importance on writing about art, right? These other elements of the artistic community that we don't always hear about. So, you know, just listening to the presentations, one of the questions that came to my mind and listening to Isabel, you know, lay out this history. I mean, I know some of like the mural history, obviously, but, you know, these artists from Compton or artists working in Compton is this question that always comes to my mind, and is, why don't we know this history? Why aren't we taught this history in school? Why doesn't the general Compton community know that the city has a history of creativity, of experimental art spaces, of artistic community that just continues on today with this new generation, right? Leading to Mel and Anthony. And why should the past, or not knowing about our artistic past, matter when we start to imagine a Compton arts future? Because ultimately, you know, we're going through this history and understanding our present, so to also know where we're going, right? So in my opinion, obviously there are at least three reasons for this historical void. The first two are very obvious, that many of us are familiar with. One, as we know, there has always been a hyper focus on crime and violence as representative of Black and Brown people in Compton. And when that is conceived as the essence of our community, there is no room to think of the city as a city of Black and Brown creatives and thinkers that it truly is. And we know that these are often racist views in the media that are invested in keeping Compton and its people in a box of perpetual Black and Brown suffering, right? And two, for years, there has also been a hyper focus on rap music as the only form of creativity that is allowed to come out of Compton, and often the only one that's really encouraged. And now I love rap music, and I know that many of us are proud, right, of our rappers that represent the city, but many of us also grew up knowing artists in our schools, artists in our neighborhoods, and artists in our families, artists who were interested in a range of other mediums that include drawing and painting, mural art, graffiti art, poetry, we knew performance artists, video artists, actors, filmmakers, right? I think all of us always know somebody who was an artist and has gone off to do amazing things. So there has never been a lack of artists in Compton, but with so much attention, as much as attention that Compton gets, our artistic communities are often overshadowed by these stereotypes of violence or rap as the only form of art from the city. So this leads me to the third less obvious reason, but one that I think about as an art historian, and that is that there's also this underestimated or almost non-existent value on writing about artists in our community, writing about our own art histories. And so what I want to explain a little bit is about my own work as an art historian, and how this same question of why don't we know this history, why am I not taught this in school, shaped my own work into being an art historian and a professor of art history, but also pushed me into these broader issues having to do with, well, who gets to write history? Who gets to decide who is a creator or a consumer? Who gets to decide what art is, or who is an artist, or what's good art, right? And most importantly, understanding that making art is an act of resistance against the system of negation that denies humanity of Black and brown people, and that creativity is a testament to that humanity. And we see this already with, Anthony was just talking about this as well. And this could be, obviously, we're talking about Compton, but this could also apply to Detroit or Flint, Michigan, or the border towns of the Southwest, or the reservations. All these Black and brown and indigenous communities whose artistic abilities are not just excluded, but negated and erased from the so-called art world or from Eurocentric art histories, these dominant narratives that are then repeated and recycled in museums and in schools and in universities, leading new generations to ask the same questions. Why don't I see myself in art? Why don't I see my community? Why aren't we on those museum walls, right? And well, for me, my journey began with questioning that invisibility. Growing up as a kid in Compton in the 80s and the 90s, going through the Compton school system. I mean, obviously this was a very unique time, but for me personally, those years also coincided with a moment in time during which many of my family members were escaping a war in El Salvador, a war that was supported with military training and funding by the United States. So growing up in this context at the nexus of these two different wars had challenges, obviously, but I was also very fortunate to have art around me all the time. My family members who fled the war were all self-taught artists, and I attended a visual and performing arts school program for years with my sister that was run by Compton artists and teachers, in which we took visual art, but also dance and theater and music as well. And that immersion into the various art forms at a young age and the support from my family and the community, I feel saved my life, and art forever became a part of me. And yet, I somehow still didn't believe that I could have a profession as an artist or in the art world, even though as a teenager, I had my first job at a big museum as an intern, because in that museum, I didn't see my community reflected on those walls. People who looked like me were the security, were cleaning the floors, or were cooking in the fancy museum restaurants. I felt I was entering someone else's world, not mine. And that feeling of not belonging in that art world was a big deterrent. And one of the key moments that changed all of this was when I began learning and researching the art of Emory Douglas, who was a member of the Black Panther Party. He was their official artist and Minister of Culture. And I know, Rosalind, you have also collaborated with him. His art was found in the pages of the Panther newsletter, so it was accessible to the community. He didn't need museum walls. Emory not only represented the resistance of poor Black communities like Compton with dignity and strength, but he connected the struggles in the hood with liberation and decolonization struggles everywhere. He created art that was anti-imperialist, anti-US intervention in Central America, because the Panthers understood that the oppression of Black, brown, and indigenous people in the US was connected to systems of power that oppress racialized people around the world. And to me, that was so powerful, because I began to understand how making art was not only a form of reflecting on the challenges in our communities, right? Like racism, police brutality, inequality, but it was also a challenge to a system of power that devalues Black and brown and indigenous lives globally. And once we understand as Black, brown, and indigenous people that our oppression is connected, we also understand that our resistance and liberation can be and should be a collaborative effort. And that was so empowering to me. It's like mind-blowing, right? So in other words, Emory's art was a form of storytelling, a story that asserted and testified to the existence and creative resilience of people otherwise erased. And for me, writing about his art taught me the kind of art historian that I wanted to be. A storyteller of art history is denied by these hegemonic systems. So even, if the mainstream art world still seems like a deterrence to me, writing about art, this kind of art, became a pathway to understanding the world and the interconnected communities I belong to. And that's basically what I've dedicated my life to. I started my work writing about Central American artists from that space of invisibility. And now I collaborate with a wide community of artists in the region and the diaspora, and I write and I teach these alternative art histories so that the current and next generations can see their stories in art. So I guess my 2 cents here is that, you know, in order to imagine, to design, and to materialize what Compton futures will look like, we need to look to the past and we need to question the voids, know where we've come from so that we know where we're going, so that when we attempt to fill in the voids and create our own cultural infrastructures and policies, we don't replicate the same traps that made us invisible in the first place. So along with supporting artistic production, because we have to support our artists at every age, and I don't mean once you're, you know, you have an MFA or you're a professional artist, or once you made it to, you know, some big museum. I mean, when they're in elementary school, when they're middle school, when they're in high school, you know, and those who are not formally, you know, getting an institutional education, right? Who are not going to the university. You don't need a degree to make art. So we need to support our artists, but we also have to encourage art writing, art education, art preservation and conservation, art criticism from and about Compton. We have artists and thinkers and theorists in the city already. And that begins with these type of conversations, right? Making space, even virtually, to share our thoughts, experiences, and connect with each other as we plan for, you know, Compton art futures, right? So just in thinking about, you know, listening to all of these different presentations, you know, I want to make some reflections. Like, for instance, you know, Isabel, as you're giving us this history of murals, you know, I'm thinking about how murals always reflect their times, right? They have from the moment, you know, from the ones on caves to, you know, the 1920s to the 50s, and even now, walls are somehow, they have this double meaning, right? On the one hand, they're a metaphor for barriers that affect Black and brown people and people of color, especially like when we think about, you know, the border and this slogan of, you know, build the wall, right, that we were bombarded with in the last few years. But at the same time, walls are also an act of taking ownership of a city, of creating our own narratives, of reflecting back to the community. And that's where that power has always been in the history of, you know, just public art and murals, right? And now, you know, we can see these murals and public art reflecting issues like, you know, Black Lives Matter and, you know, liberation of Palestine and, you know, abolition and, you know, getting rid of detention centers, like all of these different issues, they're almost like a witness to our contemporary times. But like, you know, Anthony mentioned earlier, they also archive, you know, our histories and our moments, especially when these aren't always archived in media or mainstream media or other spaces. And I thought it was interesting that Mel said that, you know, her art was not political, but it was just vibrant and colorful and hopeful. And I thought, but that is political, right? Because the history of Compton, as it has been projected back to us, has always been about violence and death and hopelessness, right? And that's why, you know, creating images of hope and joy is as radical, you know, as anything else, because you're creating these other ways of being that are usually denied to us, right? And that is as important, and that is also a political act. And, you know, and I also wanted to mention how, Anthony, you mentioned how your art teachers, you know, were so important to you and encouraged you. And I want to give a shout out also to, you know, Mr. Hall, Miss Ferris, Miss Alita, Miss Beverly Neufeld, who were my theater teachers, my English teachers, my art teachers. Mr. Hall was there. I wasn't even enrolled in his art class, but he encouraged me. And every time I walk into his classroom, he was like, everybody say hello to the artist, right? And, you know, that seems silly now. It's a funny memory to me as I think about my high school days, but I will never forget that man, because he made me feel, even when I wasn't in an art class, that I was an artist, right? That was never a question in my life. I always knew I was. Now I'm a boring academic. But that's another story, right? I grew up being an artist, and no one could ever take that away from you when, you know, as a kid and as a student, your community encourages that, right? And that's why, you know, art education is also so important. So anyways, I also wanted to, open it up to a broader conversation before we go to the Q&A. So I wanted to ask first Mel and Anthony this question, in Western art, right? One of the myths of the Western art world is the artist as this sort of like solitary, tortured, genius artist. But as muralists and working with the community, that's a very different experience. So I wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about, what that is like working with the community, being accountable to a community, but also moments where you may have collaborated with each other or, collaborated with other artists, and any insights that you may have on that.
Well, I've enjoyed collaborating with other artists, and I would say all of my murals have been with help of community members. Like I don't mind collaborating with artists. I actually enjoy it. Yeah, I like my solo time in my studio. My studio work is the solo stuff, but like murals have usually been collaboration. Yeah, so the solitary artist myth, I don't think that's a thing. Or maybe it is when you're in your studio and you're trying to come up with ideas. But I think when it comes to like painting, like you can paint with somebody.
Yeah, so I enjoy collaborating with artists as well. I honestly think that Mel is the only artist that I've like really sat and planned out an entire mural with. And that was really interesting, sort of going back and forth with the ideas, because it wasn't really an issue for us to work together. I think the issue was trying to give the folks that we were working for what they were actually looking for. Because we were super excited to just be able to have the opportunity that we were just thinking of, like painting like the most wildest, crazy, like detailed filled mural, but they were really just looking for something kind of simple, So it was interesting to kind of have that dynamic, because usually it's the commissioner who wants like the best painting or whatever that you can get them, but it was sort of like they were asking us to tone it down a little bit. So the mural actually came out a lot simpler than what we had originally wanted to do, and it was very limited. We knew going in that the facility was having issues with graffiti, and that was their primary reason for looking for a mural, was to deter the graffiti. And like even Mel and I, during the planning of this mural, we were like, well, what if we just did something that would look good tagged up, like we could even add like graffiti ourselves if we wanted to, and like already sort of like, just so that it would blend in, or like if we had enough details and a lot of stuff going on, maybe the graffiti and the tagging wouldn't even like stand out so much. But I don't think they were really seeing what we were saying. So we decided to go with something a little simple and then just push the image up higher, so that folks can't really get up there. So this mural is like 140 feet across, about 10 to 15 feet, or actually 20 feet actually high. All I know is that it's like over 3,000 square feet. So the squares that you're seeing is actually about 5 to 6 feet tall, the little shapes at the bottom, and then the mural starts a lot higher than where the average person can reach. So planning this mural was actually like, it was smooth-ish, in the sense that like Mel and I never really like butted heads on what we thought should go there, especially when we kind of realized that our options were a little limited. But we did what we could with, what we were being asked to do. So I think it came out great. It could have been better, but I'm proud to have worked on this with Mel. It's, we also get the bragging rights of saying that we created the biggest mural in the city. So it was dope. And then the other murals that I've done, at Markham, have always incorporated the kids and like my coworkers as well. So I've always I'm used to collaborating with folks while I'm actually like painting. or like I'll have friends come out and they just, you know, because they want to help and they have a background in service as well, they come and help me out too. So I love working with folks and having them help me out, because it's exhausting to be out there by yourself.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I was wondering if you could also talk a little bit about having creative freedom, how important that is. You know, artists don't always have creative freedom, right? Because whether it's subject matter or style, this might be dictated by whoever's commissioning a work, right? Whether it's a local business or community organization or corporation. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about your ideas of creative freedom. What are some of the challenges, but also some of the possibilities that you can think of?
I think it starts off with the illusion of creative freedom, because towards the end, like the finished product is always like what the person commissioning wants. So there is kind of creative freedom with like your style maybe, but like I feel like the subject matter is usually the commissioner's like idea. Yeah.
For me, I don't know, I've had a lot of issues with getting creative freedom. And it wasn't even brought to my attention that like a mural isn't even supposed to have like logos or anything in it. Like I had no idea about that. I didn't even know that there was a mural ordinance, you know? But yeah, my experiences have always been sort of exhausting when it comes to going back and forth with someone who like wants a mural, but in my head, I'm like, do they want my work, or do they just want the work of an artist? You know, like, because I sort of expect that if you're commissioning me for a mural, you've seen my work, you see the type of work that I do, you see the type of people that I paint. So you should already sort of expect something similar to that, you know? And I've like literally had people tell me, you know, why don't you just paint pretty pictures? Like, why don't you just do the Hollywood sign? Why don't you just paint flowers? Like, why does it have to be this, you know? And I was already like three quarters into a mural, and I was like, are you serious? Like, you know, like the fact that someone would even feel comfortable saying something like that to me, you know, as I'm already working on the mural that has been approved, you know? I've also had like experiences where like I'll do a sketch with like some Black people or like Black kids or something with a nonprofit org, and they'll see my sketch and be like, oh, well, you know, we want to do something that's more inclusive and where people, you know, won't get offended, and we don't want trouble. So like, why don't you just paint these like hands, you know, holding hands, and they're like different colors, and, you know, like very like kumbaya kindergarten mural, you know? But like, that's not what I do. And like recently, because I feel like I've been so lucky with the opportunities that I've run into, I'm starting to be a lot more picky, or I'm like sort of just like setting the bar a little higher when it comes to, you know, inquiring with folks about murals that they want. And if I realize that if what they're looking for is not me, then I'll just send them in a different direction, or like, you know, give them a list of artists that I feel would be able to do a better job. But yeah, I'm really starting to just be very strong-minded about the work that I do and be very intentional, because it's my work, and that is my entire life. You know, there's a story and an experience behind every single one of my pieces. So, you know, if I'm doing the work and the labor into creating a mural, you know, I want it to be accepted for what it is, and not, you know, something that's generic, or, you know, some like an image that someone already has set out for me to do, you know, because I don't color by number, you know, I'm an artist, and I conceptualize my own pieces. So that's been my experience.
Thank you. And I just have one question for Isabel before I guess we can open it. I'll pass it over back to Ross. and Janice. You know, Compton, I mean, Anthony mentioned this in the beginning, but Compton is its own city, so it doesn't fall under the jurisdiction of the mural ordinance for the city of Los Angeles. But as we begin to think about, you know, and work towards a cultural infrastructure for Compton that includes thinking about policy, right? That's also part of it. What are some points around art and policy that you think we should consider and know about?
Well, you know, as you know, that since Compton is its own city, now artists, muralists are free to do whatever they want on the walls or whatever the people who commission them should be doing. But I think some of the benefits of having a mural ordinance had to do with the fact, for example, that when they commission the mural, you have your freedom unless you do something, you know, discrimination or against religion or something pornographic. They can't tell you that you cannot do whatever it is that you're doing. You present your sketch to the city, the Department of Cultural Affairs, they approve, you know, and it takes about 2 weeks, and you pay I think it's $100 to have the permit, and then you go ahead and paint your mural. But I think once you do register your mural with the city, what it does, they protect the murals. They become part of their list of murals that are protected, and then if your mural get tagged, they go and they clean it. And also, I was able with the Public Works to secure 450 feet of protected layer for the murals, which is exactly what you spoke before about your last mural. I always tell the artists to make the mural a little higher than ground level, and to protect the bottom part with the free 450 free square feet of protective layer, because you know it's higher is where you want to protect. And so if your mural is protected, it gives you the possibility that you are creating something for the future. You're inspiring the future generations. Like what Kency said earlier, how come we don't know? How come, you know, we don't know that there's a mural ordinance? How come we don't know that there are all these murals in the past of Compton or South LA? Because who writes the history? Who writes the history in our cities, countries, neighborhoods, right? It's not us. We need to write our own history. And I'm saying that creating those murals, we're creating our own history. We're giving the possibility to the passersby, particularly the youth, the children, to look at those murals and look at themselves, because in the murals that I saw that you guys create, you can see, you know, like the kids are gonna ask, who is that person? Who is the artist that did this? And this is gonna be like a cultural bridge for the youth to go to the internet and find out who are those artists or who are the people conveyed on the murals. And it's gonna be like opening the door or crossing that bridge to go to galleries and museums and giving them the opportunity to speak about our culture, you know, to let people know who we really are. So there are many benefits in having the mural ordinance, but at the same time, I feel if it was up to me in 2011 or all those years that we were fighting for a mural ordinance, to me, I believe in freedom of expression. So the fact that somebody is kind of limiting or telling you how to do things is something that is difficult for me, even though I'm not an artist. For artists, the creativity of an artist is being free of all those regulations. So I love the fact that in the 80s until the 90s, you know, until the mural moratorium began in 2002, artists went out in the neighborhoods and they just painted, and they brought to those walls the issues that were affecting us. Is what I saw during the Black Lives Matters movement, which you know, I was documenting on Melrose and downtown. All those beautiful murals that were painted on plywood because it was the only way they could be done, where everybody spoke about what was affecting our culture, our people. And to me, you know, those are benefits of not having an ordinance. But when you do have it, it helps you protect, you know, the mural for the future. And if it gets stuck, it gets clean, and you're part of a list of murals that the city gathers for future generations. When I work at the Mural Conservancy, I went out with my assistants in the car. We all got in my car, everybody with the camera, and we took photos all over the city. And then, I made a little bit of research, very simple, and we entered those in the website. And so many students, scholars, writers go to that, and they had learned about, the murals, because there's no other organization. It's no money to restore murals. It's very literally little money to create murals. So it's, there's so many things, Kency, to go back to your question. I think at this point, I think it's so important, since we're talking about Compton, that I would like to give a push to whomever lives in Compton, whether are nonprofit organizations or businesses or philanthropies or the famous people that came out of Compton, to donate money, to pour money in the community, so the history of the community is written on the walls of the community, until you guys go for a mural ordinance and things get more limited or more difficult.
We have that on record. Let's do it. So, Kinsey, I'm sorry, I just butted in, but I want your conversation, which is amazing, to continue. We're just here holding on to your every word, you guys' every word.
I just wanted to ask that final question to Isabel, and then maybe open it up to anybody who has questions in the audience. I'll let you take over it.
And what's
okay. If anyone has questions, please type them in the Q&A now. But I have a question. This is a question that we ask, Janice and I ask at every Reading the City, which is for the two artists, Mel and Anthony. And it's, usually we're asking the past tense, but right now we're asking in the present tense, which is how much do you feel, or how do you feel, if so, that Compton specifically influences your work? And as you develop, grow, and ascend as an artist, does it feel lonely here? Do you feel supported here in the city? Or does your support come from without? Do you find that you have to be outside of the city for more support, or do you notice things like that? So I guess it's a twofold question. One is Compton's influence on the arc of your work or career. And two, do you feel like there's an artist community here, that you're not alone in Compton? And do you feel supported by the city?
So I'll go first. My work, yeah, I mean, I would say that it's inspired by Compton, in the sense that, like, I just want to celebrate the different, the different forms of, like, beauty that exists here within Black people, and, like, our histories and our possibilities, looking at the future. I have pieces where I've recreated some old photos that my family took here in the city, but then also thinking about, like, creating new works that celebrate demographics in the city that usually are, like, overlooked, so Black queer folks and Afro-Latinos and stuff like that. So I would say that it's inspired in that sense. And whether or not I feel supported, I mean, I know that there definitely is a community of artists here, and there's definitely some sort of movement happening in the city. I do feel like it is sort of a movement that a lot of folks sort of want to like jump on, and in a good way and in a bad way, you know, because I feel like because Compton, the name is so profitable in itself, when folks see that, you know, there's some sort of like hip art movement going on in the city, like people want to participate and contribute to that, you know, and that's fine. But whether or not like I want to participate is the, you know, the question that I ask myself, and normally it's no. Usually because it is like if there's anything that like people come in and like try to like, you know, bring a celebrity or something like that, or like it sort of like turns me off because we already deal with so much like recognizing celebrities and like recognizing like all of these rich folks that like come out of Compton, when there's already so many talented folks that like exist here within, you know, who live like right next door to us. And then I've also just seen, like, being a part of a couple of group shows here in Compton, is that like the artists aren't always from Compton. So it's like people are again benefiting off of being able to come to Compton and you know, say that they did a show here or whatever. I do feel that if we try to get any sort of like movement to like really you know, get the wheels turning here in the city, is that, you know, we first of all need to have a city council and a city government that is willing to cooperate with each other, because it's no secret that there's been a lot of drama within the city council itself. We've never had a city manager here that has stayed longer than like a couple of years, and from what I know, all of our like requests for murals have been directed towards the city managers. And then there's also like that grab, you know, again, that people just, you know, they want to support the arts, but they also want to like put their name on it or like put a logo on it, you know, to sort of claim that they're doing something and to like have this like conscious appeal, you know. But it's just like, I feel like how Isabel said, you know, at some point I'm just gonna go outside and start painting walls, and like no one's gonna be like say anything to me, you know. Like I'm just sort of hitting that point to where like I just want to do things and like take it in my own hands, because I'm like almost 30 years old and I've barely done one mural here in the city, you know, by myself, you know, and it's taking too long, and my time's running out, you know. So I'm getting more tired as the years come, and I'm just gonna like just start going for it, you know.
Oh, you're getting tired. Oh man. Okay, we have one question in the Q&A. Stephanie Bravo says, are there any future projects on your roster, either of you artists?
As of now, I don't have any future projects in Compton.
Okay.
Yeah, so just personal work, studio work.
Oh, okay. How about you, Anthony?
So no, either. I think because we're just like starting to come out of quarantine. Like I just finished a mural, and like I'm doing this right now, and a couple months ago I did the activity here at Color Compton, but I don't really have anything sort of planned for the future. What
mural did you just finish?
So Markham has this huge retina piece. It's an outdoor amphitheater, and they had me come in and do the school name right under the retina piece, like where the stage is at. And I worked on that last week.
Wow. Under the retina piece, or by the side?
It's like, so the retina piece is on the back wall of the amphitheater where the stage is at, and I did the name in front of the stage.
Do you know which one is the retina mural?
Yeah, it's like as soon as you go into Markham.
No, but what is it? Just his writing?
Yeah, it's just his writing.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, it's a huge mural. It's really nice.
Well, I'm happy to see that you guys have a little bit of time because we're going to ask you to do some things with us. So just be warned. I think, Janice, you had a question that you were going to ask.
Yes, there's a couple of questions here, or one question kind of came up from from the topic around so gentrification, and I wanted to pose the question, and maybe Isabel and Kinsey can also speak to this in terms of your research and work in like policy and research. So basically, in terms of the connection between art and gentrification, like how do you address the concern, or yes, I'll say that. How do you address the concern that community-based art can contribute or contributes to gentrification?
You want to go for it, Kency?
Sure. Can you repeat the question again? What?
How do you address the concern that like community-based art can or does contribute to gentrification?
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's real, right? Just like the co-optation of artists, the co-optation of art, the co-optation of community is a very real thing. And I think that the more that we understand how the process of securing a commission, creating work, checking in with the community, policy, all of these things, the more we're informed the history, the more we can understand those traps that I was talking about. How do we not fall into those traps, right? And so gentrification, especially the role of art in gentrification, is a very real thing. And we are seeing these movements, I mean, especially in Boyle Heights, but also in New York, all of these neighborhoods that in which art comes in, or projects or galleries that don't really belong to the neighborhood, as a way to lure in more people, but also in the process, the prices of rent go up, and then the people from those communities end up being displaced, right? So, I mean, I think it's one of like the big dilemmas that we currently have right now. And I'm really concerned, especially as we're getting out of this pandemic, or transitioning into a new phase of it, I don't know. And, we're still dealing with people who are not able, to have affordable living, especially around Los Angeles. And even in Compton, we see that happening. I mean, I don't know if anybody looks at mortgage prices or anything like that, but a house in Compton is incredibly expensive nowadays, right? And I think about my family, my parents who were, in their 30s, with kids, undocumented, and being able to buy a house, and how that's not a reality now because gentrification does have this ripple effect, and it's going to continue to do so. So, I mean, I don't have an answer for the issue of gentrification, but I think that definitely it's something that the more we are informed about the processes of how art and creating galleries or creating shows or creating spaces and community projects, the more we know about that, the more we're able to catch those traps and not fall into that problem, and not have Compton, although I feel like it's already happening, become a site of gentrification, right? And also when we do identify it, to be loud about it and against it, which is something that it's a movement nationwide. I mean, worldwide, it's not just Compton, right? But Compton already has all these other different kind of appeals, like Anthony mentioned, that are commodified, right? Like they have the city has certain street cred. The city has, a name, right? That regardless of the reputation can bring attention. So we also need to be careful of the city not being co-opted, right? In that process. So, I mean, I don't know, those are just some thoughts, and I'll pass it over to Isabel, who can probably talk more about.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you in this one. I really believe that it's not the fault of the artists. The gentrification has nothing to do with the artists. As a matter of fact, to me, the artists, the more I see art in the communities, the more I feel that we belong. It brings beauty, it brings our culture, it brings new ideas, and we keep on speaking about who we are on those walls. developers are the ones that cause the gentrification, not the artists. It's the other
Yeah,
way
and
around.
I didn't mean to say that the artists are causing the gentrification, but I mean knowing those different actors, right, that are involved in the process.
Yeah.
I actually agree with you.
The developers are the one who are causing gentrification, who is causing all this homelessness in the city. And, you know, I remember when I was volunteering at Skid Row in downtown LA, and the homeless people, they created a mural that it mapped the homeless geographically, and how many homeless people were in the county. I'm talking about 2012. There were 26,000 homeless people. Today, there's 60,000. And we're talking about murals, but this is completely part of our conversation. And, you know, so many more people are, you know, out of, they don't have homes. But it has to do with the developers. They are creating the economy in this city, and the politics of the country, you know, had caused this problem. So I believe that the more art that we have in the streets, the more we're gonna deter tagging. The more that the people are gonna, the people in the community, like for me, I love to take a walk in my community and see the murals that are painted in my community, and I'm getting involved. I'm telling my community, we need more murals here. And I also believe that the question that was asked before to you, Mel and Anthony, about how do you feel in the community, and I think it's important that you do what you do in your community, but don't close yourself to be only a Compton artist. Be an artist. Just be an artist. And you know, like Rose has been, I had created shows, and Rose has been part of my exhibitions. I include everybody because I like to open those doors. I like to have that conversation and the dialogue that we're having right now here. And if I were to be an artist, my dialogue would be painting walls or creating arts on canvases, but I would not limit myself to only my community. I would like to be part of a group, a crew that includes people from different ideas, different kind of thoughts, because you enrich yourself when you do that. I mean, that's my personal opinion. But again, you know, I do not believe that gentrification, and I know Kency doesn't think that either, that the artists cause that. Is, you know, the developers and the economy that cause that. So
Thanks for dropping knowledge, Isabel. I do agree with that. It's not the artist, but, you know, to kind of show how blurry things are sometimes, you know, we also can talk about the responsibility of the artist, right? So what about when an artist is informed of developers coming in or of projects that have these kind of intentions? What is the political stand that an artist can take? And again, there's no answer, but I do believe that the artist also has some kind of agency, right? And the artist also has an ethical responsibility and political responsibility to not also, you know, fall into that trap. And again, by knowing more and understanding even how gentrification happens, what the role of developers is, what's happening in the city, who's getting pushed out from their homes, you know, not just out of the city, but even out of the state, right? Because they can no longer live there. Understanding the struggles that the community is going through, especially around homelessness, is as important, you know, as being an artist that's creating work that is inspired by the city. So, I mean, I totally agree. It's not, art is not the problem, right? To be clear, art is not the problem. Artists are not the problem. But in the context that we live in, there's also certain responsibilities and information that I think the artist also, you know, needs to be aware of, right? And knowing what role they're playing in this process. So, yeah.
I just want to jump in and say, everyone, we've gone over a little bit, which we always do. I just want to invite the audience to stick around because this is when it gets hype. This is when it comes in. And Anthony, I see you have, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, so I was actually going to say what Kinsey just said is like, I don't think artists are responsible for gentrification, but I definitely do feel that as artists, we do play some role into gentrification. And I think when you think about murals, we need to think about the rise in property values and also consumerism and the way that like it's just super accessible. Speaking specific to Compton is like the way that we've seen large corporations come into the city, and it's like just really easy for these corporations to be able to say like, hey, we want to do a mural, like where are the artists at? And then they come in and, you know, they get their list of artists and it's so easy, but like we're sitting here as Compton artists and like thinking like, well, how can we get a mural? Like, how can we plan? Like, who can we talk to about getting a mural? Or like, what kind of group do we have to form together? What permits do we need to go through? But then we see these like large corporations, you know, come in and like I said, they either do it without a permit because we've done that before, or they do it with a permit and they go through the city and, you know, they're very buddy and they're able to like get all of these permits and stuff like super quick, which is faster than anyone else here, you know? So like we're sitting here and I'm, like I just said, I'm at the point where I'm just gonna go out and like just start painting on walls and see who stops me, you know, because I'm always given the runaround. And then, like I said, we're always either pointed towards the city manager, but our city manager position here has never been permanent. So it's like, who are these corporations talking to and who are they getting the okay from when they get here, you know, because it seems like the pattern is whenever there's like a new building or like a new store or a new whatever, it's really easy to get public art made. And yeah, I don't know, that's always been sort of weird for me. I think also as just a community of people taking art out of it, but also like thinking about the way that art can contribute to gentrification, is that like as a community, I think it's super important that we match the amount of power that these corporations are coming in with. We should be able to hold these corporations accountable. We should be able to dictate what it is that they can do and what they are not going to do. It's also really important for us to just, you know, to have like these folks who are very vigilant and who are looking out for these signs of gentrification. You know, it's all out of love and for preserving the community, but I don't know, it just always seems like the people who are here like actually wanting to do the work are usually overlooked up until there's like this opportunity. And I can say like, oh, I don't think that's right and I'm not gonna do it, but somewhere out there, there is someone that is gonna take that commission, because the opportunities are so limited that when these opportunities rise up, it's like whether or not you agree with it or not, someone's gonna take it. You know, and that's just because as artists here from Compton, we don't have the opportunities. We can't say like, we wanna do a mural here and like get it done. We sort of have to wait for the opportunity to come to us. And that's like where the fatigue is coming from as well. It's like, I wanna be able to create works for people, but not through a corporation, you know? Like, I just wanna be able to paint a mural, like, I don't know, like on the side of a school or something, you know? I don't wanna paint a mural on a 7-Eleven or a Popeyes or a Walmart or something, you know? Like, I want it to be intentional. I want it to be, you know, to stay in the community and to be for the community and made because the community asks for it. So while artists don't necessarily gentrify communities, we do sort of play a role. And I think it's up to the artist's integrity, whether there is one or not, to sort of question and look at themselves from the outside and see like what it is that we can do as artists, as activists, if that's what you want to call it, to sort of do things the way that we feel like we have the control over it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just want to say I feel you so much, and I feel you when you talk about that fatigue. I know that fatigue, but I also want to say, just for the sake of agency, our politics may not all be in the same place, and so I think it's really important as Black and Brown artists to be able to make that decision of how we want to paint, what we want to do. I always say sometimes I just want to paint flowers. I don't want to paint anything else. I just want to paint a flower. And I should be free to do that. And so artists should be free as well to decide if their work is, all the way purely for profit, all the way to purely for the people and everything in between. And we fall all, you know, in all those places. And I think that, you know, all of us have a desire to kind of make that space too available. Like whatever decision you make, you should be able to do that. You should be able to do that, you know? But of course I am, you know, completely anti-gentrification. I just wanted to say that. Any other questions? I think we have one more question, but Janice, I can't see it.
Yes, the last question, and I really appreciate all the, the responses to gentrification. And I would want to add, like as an urban planner, that many times, like gentrification is also really driven by like demographic shifts, economic shifts. Research shows that, gentrification happens a lot around like major colleges and universities, like which you see with some local in the region, major colleges and universities. So there are a lot of factors and like larger factors that drive gentrification. I would add, to also be considered. So the last question is from Robert Johnson. What narrative do you use to tell? What narrative do you use to tell the history of the city of Compton?
We can't hear you.
Oh, no?
No, we can't hear Ross.
Okay.
There.
Oh, did you hear? I think Janice was asking the artists. Is this a question for the artists, Janice?
I think it's a general question. It probably may speak to the folks who, are from Compton, but to any of you all, what narrative do you use to tell the history of the city of Compton?
Mel, did you want to talk about that?
I'm looking up what narrative actually means. What is the narrative that I use to describe Compton? I describe Compton for what I feel Compton is. Compton is my home. And that's the narrative. Yeah.
I think also for me is like the narrative of Compton, like Mel said, Compton is her home, and Compton is for me what it is for me, the way that it is, for you what it is for you. There's so much diversity into our experiences here in Compton that is not just, dependent on like one thing or the other. We all sort of go through the city here and have our own experiences, and we build our own images of nostalgia in our head and what reminds us of home. And so, I've never really had to sort of explain to someone what Compton is, because I'm over explaining to people what Compton is in the first place. But yeah, like usually when people ask me what Compton's like, I'm just like, it's just like a regular, it's like a typical city,
Even though I don't live in Compton and I'm not an artist, I think if I were to answer that question, I would say I would paint anything that is not written on the newspapers or I see on the news. I would focus on the wonderful things that you guys have. Like reading about Compton, knowing that it's the first city that declared itself a city, that's so important. How come nobody ever talks about that? We're talking about, the early 19th century, I think, when it declared itself a city. Why don't, like that, to me, that's so important to talk about all the wonderful positive things. And even the simple people, the community, the neighbor that is a volunteer, that helps the kids in the neighborhood to cross the street, or to, there's so many unsung heroes in Compton and in our communities that nobody speaks about. I think that's, in a way, it's the job of the muralists to speak about all those unsung heroes, all those people that do so much for our people that nobody bothers to write about, or, you know, when you see the news about Compton and they on TV or the newspapers, it's not about that. So I would do that. I would address it that way, bring out all those things that we don't know about, including all those murals that I was talking to you about earlier that so many people don't know. I talk to people, oh, I didn't know that he was from there. I didn't know that he painted that mural. And mentor the younger generation, the little kids, as you do, Anthony. I don't know about you, Mel, if you work with youth, but it's so important that we pass that history. And I feel that, as my case as an elder, that I want to pass that knowledge, and I want to, for people to know that all these wonderful artists that wrote history in Compton, all those people that we lost, you know, recently, let's talk about them. Let's make a mural of that. You know, how come we don't have a huge mural in Compton, you know, like Pinckney, you know? Let's do that. And people will ask. If they don't know, who is that person? The kids are gonna ask you, and you can tell them all the wonderful things that he did and how he put us together. Black and browns working always together so we can advance in this society. That's,
We should have Pinckney Park.
yeah, that'd be awesome.
I guess I just wanted to add to that, that I think for me, not also creating art, but as a historian and an academic, and understanding the power dynamics, right, of like those who get to create history. The one thing that has hurt us, I think in Compton the most, is that a narrative has already been adopted from the outside that then is imposed on us constantly over and over again. So I think for me, what I constantly try to do in my work, and I mean, even just in my own work on working in other geographical areas, is how to break that narrative and show that there are multiple narratives created from different subjectivities, and that they're not always written in text, because we also give certain validity to the published book as this is the history, this is the accepted, you know, history. But, you know, this is why I was talking about, you know, Emory Douglas as the storyteller. Art is a different type of language that also tells a history. Poetry, metaphor is a different type of language that also tells the history. Dance is a different type of corporal language that also tells the history. And so I'm all about, you know, breaking that dominant narrative and revealing and giving space for a multitude of narratives that will not be the same. They will be from different perspectives. They will show different sides. They will show how complex, how multifaceted, how rich and diverse the city and its history really is, right? So for me, I'm always thinking about how to break that narrative and how to go against that and include those perspectives that don't ever make it to the textbooks or don't ever make it to the dominant image that is then thrown back at us, right? And obviously art, it's an amazing thing to do that.
But I think it's important that we all revisit, you know, the Black art movement, the aesthetics of Black art, because it's something that people had forgotten, you know, because it was more important at the time, poetry, music, and literature. So visual art became like the little sister of it. And I will push you guys that I think it's important, and we privately had talked about this before, that you do your catalog of the murals of Compton. Bring that up, you know, so people know that. And I think that that's when you use the businesses and you tell them, we're doing this catalog, we are a nonprofit, or we are this group of people, and we have these artists here, and, you know, donate some money so we can make a catalog to bring the important culture of our city and make it available to all in the city. And then that can go to other neighborhoods and it can become part of our history, you know, nationwide.
Yeah. It's a, you know, there's all these avenues, right? There's a nonprofit space, or there's community support and raising money. And then there's, you know, of course, you know, businesses, you know, huge businesses that come in and can afford these things and kind of fast track it for some obvious and some not obvious reasons. It just becomes very interesting because, you know, when you're in the fundraising or the nonprofit space, you're doing so much work just to get, you know, you'll do $100,000 worth of work to raise $20,000. To do.
And you write 100 grants and you get 2.
Yeah, yes. But, you know, I recognize now that it has to be done. It has to be done. And, you know, I'm just grateful that everyone on this panel is doing the work, their particular work. Is really powerful, and it's been really powerful to spend this time with you guys tonight. I'm just going to say your names again if I can. Isabel Rojas Williams, Anthony Pittman, Kinsey Cornejo, Mel De Paz, and Janice Miller. It's really my honor to be with you.
And your name? What about your name?
And Rosalind McGarry.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, everybody. This was amazing. I'm going to study it because there's so much information in this particular Reading the City. There's so much to learn from. So I'm so grateful for you. And we are going to study it and we're going to move forward. So stay tuned. And thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rosalind, Janice, and everybody, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to keep it going.
We definitely will.
Thank you all.
Bye. Have a nice evening. Thank you for the invite. See you guys soon. Apply for grants. Oh, you guys apply for grants, you guys. You know, you want to make murals. There is money pouring into the state.
We got them on the table right now, Isabel. Really, honestly, I swear.
Perfect. All right.
Okay.
Bye. Thank you. I love you back. Bye.